Hello out there, you wonderful people. This is Andre the Game. My dear guy, thank you once again for lending me your time and your ear, listening into another Gamer Thoughts discussion. And this one's going to be asking a question that's kind of inspired by some Twitter posts that I saw. Um, would it be worth it for Nintendo to go third party with their main games? Now, I have to specify that because, as people may want to pretend, third party Nintendo games have been done before. Now, they haven't always been done well, and on top of that, they do have games on mobile. But Nintendo has done third party games before. So it's not exactly a new thing, but it would be a different thing comparing to their current circumstances where all of their main new games are center focused on one platform, and that is the Switch. Now, I particularly don't mind if Nintendo does third party games on a different platform. More specifically, I was thinking PC, because I still don't see them putting their games on either Xbox or PlayStation directly. But PC, I could see the market for it, because they could do exactly what Sony's doing right now and just go ahead and re-release their games on Steam, like maybe a year or two out from their console release, to give it some room to breathe, but also to generate some additional sales for their games. Now, would it be worth it for Nintendo to do that, though? That's the question. Because whether people want to believe it or not, all that port work does cost additional money. And you got to think about the fact that Nintendo has to, at that point, develop their resources and their assets to work in those different environments. So it is something that has to be considered. Now, from the player's perspective, most players are going to be like, yeah, sure, it would be great. There's extra money in it for them. And depending upon the franchise, that might actually be right. That may actually be right. And it's not like people don't already go ahead and emulate and bootleg Nintendo's games as it is. So there is a desire for it to be on those platforms. Now, obviously, there are still going to be those who decide that they're going to pirate no matter what, because they don't care. So it's not affecting them, so why should they give a damn? Obviously, we don't consider those people in this conversation. They are an outlier from what we are talking about. Or what I'm talking about, I should say. So, would it be worth it for Nintendo to make their games multiple platforms? Let's go ahead and nix my stipulation I just said for a moment, where it would just be PC that they port their stuff to. Let's say Nintendo did decide that they were going to do their games across the board. They were just going to do a multi-platform new Super Mario game, not new Super Mario franchise, because that's a different branding under the Mario license. But they do a new Super Mario game, and they're going to put it across all three of the major platforms and PC. That's a lot of money that they're not spending when they're just developing for their in-house console that people aren't considering. And then on top of that, they could just go ahead and do a quick and dirty port from their platform to the others. That's quite obvious, something that can be done. But you also have to look at it from the idea of it being a selling product, and it wouldn't be, the best look in the world if they went ahead and just said, oh, hey, we're just going to take this game from the Switch, just throw it over here without any improvements that work with the features of the console or the graphical capabilities of these consoles. No one would go for that. You got to consider that. So they would have to pay for the extra work, for the resources and assets to be remade to take those factors into account. Now, it would also be accounted for PC as well, because PC is a variable platform. So those are things that have to be considered, which this could double and even triple the amount of money it takes for them to create their games. I don't know if anybody really realizes this or not, but Nintendo's budgets are far under what most other developers are in the quote-unquote AAA space. That's how they make money, is by not overspending. So this is something that they would have to consider if they were going to make their games multi-platform like that. Now, moving it over to PC, it's not such a bad deal if they're just doing PC, because then the quick and dirty ports probably aren't going to be too big of a deal. Like, yeah, they'll still have to work on the assets, but it wouldn't be as necessary to do it, because they could make their games just run in line with what they do on their home console and call it a day. They don't have to make their games go above that, to be perfectly honest. There's no requirement for it. But if they do put them on the other home consoles, then it does become a requirement. So porting to PC, I think in and of itself would be far more efficient if they are going to put their main games on a third-party console. Again, just considering it. But there's the other thing. The fact that their stuff is exclusive to them is one of the reasons for people to buy their hardware, and they know that. If they get rid of that exclusivity, they almost lose the reason for it. Now, I know somebody's going to be like, well, but look at what Sony does. Difference is Nintendo keeps their price point pretty much the same throughout a generation, with some exceptions for their games. Sony doesn't do that. So Nintendo's bottom line and Sony's bottom line are looking far different at that point. Whereas Sony actually needs to do it to make the additional money to make up for the losses and cutting the prices of their games, Nintendo doesn't, because they sell their games at full price the whole time, or whatever the price the game comes out at, because not all their games are $60. But that's something Sony doesn't do. You can look 2 to 3 months down the line sometimes, and one of their AAA titles is discounted by 50%. Then you wait a year out and it's down to $20. Yeah, that's great for the consumer side of things, but for the company side, that does very poor. Which means they have no reason to not port their games over to PC eventually. They try to make all the money that they can off of it on home console for a good determined amount of time, and then re-release it, which could spur on interest, and people may go back and purchase the home console version of it at a cheaper price than what the PC port of it would be. That's also to be considered. Now, if Nintendo did this, would they be able to keep their pricing consistent on PC and keep their income flow decent for the amount of work that they put into making the port? That's something that has to be considered, something that has to be thought about. Again, on the consumer side of things, yeah, you're not going to look at that and be like, well, I don't care. You're just going to be like, well, shit, hey, it came out on Steam at $20. I can get it there cheap. That's what people are going to look at. Nintendo, on the other hand, is going to be like, well, if we can't sell it for $60, then why would we even go through the effort of putting the work in to port it and move it over there? It's got to be considered. Because I'm pretty sure there are plenty of people who would love to have an officially released version of Metroid Dread available on Steam to play, instead of having to go the roundabout way of utilizing an emulator to be able to play it on their PC. There are plenty of people who would enjoy that. But would it be able to remain at its price that long? Seeing as a lot of people, when they purchase games on PC, are purchasing them at far, far reduced prices compared to when they are buying these games on a home console, at least at launch. Again, something that has to be thought about and considered and weighed. A lot of gamers aren't going to take the time to worry about or consider that themselves, because that end of the industry doesn't directly affect them on a personal level, but it sadly does affect them on a more global level, which is why there are certain games in Nintendo's franchises that they don't go back to on a regular basis. If those games do see a release, they're far and few in between, no matter how much people cry out and say they would like to have it. And while everyone may have their own little bubble or vacuum that they're working within, Nintendo doesn't. At least not in the same way. Sorry, my allergies are acting up, so yeah. But that's what they have to look at as a company. And I mean, I know I'm not covering everything, because there's plenty more that they still have to worry about. Even taking people pirating their console versions of the game out of the equation here, they would still have to worry about people pirating the PC versions of the game as well. So it's one of those things where it's going to become a lose-lose. And yeah, I know I said to drop the idea of pirates, but that is something that they do at least have to consider in the process of thinking about if they would move these things over to third-party platforms. Again, I'm thinking PC is the best choice overall, because that doesn't require as much money, and they can still put a little bit more money in their pockets, but it's not going to be like some massive downpour of money like a lot of people are thinking. Because there's going to be either the group that waits it out to see if they drop their price, or to catch it on sale at some point on any of the different storefronts, because I can see them partnering up with Valve for Steam, and I could also see them partnering up with Epic and having it on the Epic store. Unless they just completely avoided them altogether and went to someone like Good Old Games, which I could also see Nintendo doing that as well, and giving them the platform, being the PC platform that they have exclusivity with. Again, it all comes down to whether or not it's lucrative for them. If they're not going to make money off of it, you best believe they are not going to put the effort into trying to do it. Or they're not as likely to take the risk on it. So again, these are just things that I think of off the top of my head. Now, I really don't know what they think about in the ins and outs inside the company. But from the outside looking in, these are the things that come to my mind in the immediate. And it seems like a lot of gamers, a lot of people just tend to throw that out the way and say, well, it doesn't matter because it's just what I want. That is something to be considered. It's something that could work to their disadvantage should it not work out well. And then that's wasted and lost money that could have been used on something else. So again, it is, I know most gamers wouldn't care about this, but it is definitely affecting the possibility that, hey, you can get those Nintendo games legally and legitimately on third-party hardware. Because I've always been of the mindset of it happening either one of two things. They are going to totally take over the industry, or they are going to blow out like a fart in the wind. Now, I could see Nintendo potentially experimenting with this idea in the near future, but I do not expect that if they they dip their toes in the water and there's not really a decent return, that it would continue. And they're probably going to wait until they know they have like a top quality, top selling franchise for them to do it with. I mean, honestly, a good experiment right now, besides Metroid Dread, would be the first Breath of the Wild. Put it on PC legitimately, see how well it does, and then go from there. But I don't see them doing that anytime soon. But you guys can go ahead and give me your thoughts and comments on this particular discussion. But that's it for me. Thank you guys very much for listening in. Keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me. And until the next time, enjoy your games. Peace out, everybody.